That's the fat sow we have to put up with. Those were the exact words my own daughter Jasmine shouted at her wedding, pointing at me in front of her new husband's entire wealthy family. The grand metropolitan ballroom in Charlotte, North Carolina, filled with cruel laughter as 200 guests stared at me in disgust, as if I were an animal that had mistakenly wandered into the most elegant event of the year. My cheeks burned with shame, and my hands trembled, clutching the small gift I had wrapped with such care. But then something happened that would change everything forever. Mr. Sterling, the groom's father, a distinguished man in a sharp, bespoke suit who had been chuckling along with the others, suddenly froze. His eyes locked onto my face with an expression of absolute shock. "Wait," he murmured, slowly stepping toward me as the rest of the room continued to sneer. "Aren't you my new boss?" My name is Eleanor Baines, but everyone calls me Ellie. I am 66 years old, and for the last 3 decades, I have lived like a ghost. After my husband died in an accident when Jasmine was barely 12, I became that invisible woman everyone knows. The one who cleans offices in the pre-dawn hours. The one who takes 3 separate transit lines to get to work. The one who buys clothes at Goodwill and counts every single penny before spending it. Jasmine grew up ashamed of me, of my humble job, of my rough hands that smelled of industrial cleaning products, of my worn-out shoes that squeaked across the polished granite lobbies of the corporate buildings where I worked every night. What she never knew, what no one imagined, was that while I was silently scrubbing those offices, I was listening. I listened to the late-working executives, their business plans, their failures, and their financial secrets. For years, I absorbed knowledge like a dry sponge. With the few dollars I managed to save, starting with $50 in stocks I overheard mentioned in a meeting, then $100, I began to invest. My modest 2-bedroom apartment became stacked with used finance books and economic newspapers I rescued from executive recycling bins. I studied every night after work, my eyes red with fatigue, but my heart pounding with determination. While Jasmine saw me as a failed, pathetic woman, I was secretly building an empire. My investments multiplied. I bought properties under corporate names. I acquired shares in struggling companies that later made spectacular comebacks. I became a silent partner in deals that took off beyond expectation. For 20 years, I wore the cheapest clothes, ate the simplest meals, and maintained the same humble routine, but my bank account grew to figures most people couldn't even dream of. And now, at my daughter's wedding, Mr. Sterling recognized me. He was the same man whose company I had just purchased for $45 million, $45,000, just 2 weeks prior. The man who had signed the sale papers without knowing the mysterious buyer, E.J. Beaumont, was the very woman his in-laws had just publicly humiliated. I could see the exact moment the memories clicked into place in his eyes. My face on the video conferences, my signature on the contracts, my voice during the telephone negotiations. The silence began to spread from where we stood to the rest of the ballroom like ripples in a lake. The guests noticed Mr. Sterling's expression, his sudden pallor, and the way he stared at me as if he'd just seen a ghost. Jasmine, who had been laughing with her friends over my public shame, began to realize that something was terribly wrong. Her cruel smile slowly vanished as she watched her father-in-law walk toward me with hesitant steps. "Ma'am," Mr. Sterling whispered, his voice barely audible. Is that you?" His hands trembled as he pulled out his phone, surely looking for the transaction emails, the corporate profile photos, anything to confirm what his mind refused to accept. The woman he had just scorned, the woman he saw as a family embarrassment, was the same person who now controlled the fate of his company, and, by extension, his family's financial future. And I, Ellie the Invisible, Ellie the Fat Sow, stood there, holding my small gift wrapped in cheap paper, knowing that my life was about to change forever. Because after decades of silence, my moment to speak had finally arrived. The recognition in Mr. Sterling's eyes was like watching a puzzle assemble itself piece by piece in slow motion, His fingers trembled as he slid his phone screen, desperately searching for the corporate sale emails. I could hear his shaky breathing as he compared the corporate profile photo of E.J. Beaumont, CEO, with me, the woman standing before him in a $30 wine-colored dress. "My God," he whispered, and those two words cut through the festive air like a knife. You are the one who bought Sterling Corporation." Jasmine rushed over, her heels clacking against the marble like hammer blows. "What are you talking about, Mr. Sterling?" she asked with that fake, sweet voice she used when she wanted something. "This is my mother, Eleanor. You know, the one I told you about who cleans buildings." She laughed nervously, but I could see her eyes darting between her father-in-law and me, trying to figure out what was happening. My heart was beating so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. For 20 years I had guarded this secret like buried treasure. Every night, after coming home from scrubbing offices, I sat at my small, used desk and managed multi-million-dollar transactions. I had 3 phones, one personal that Jasmine knew about, one for business I used for important calls, and an emergency one I used only for the most secret operations. I had created such a complex network of shell companies, offshore investments, and corporate aliases that not even the best forensic accountant could have tracked me. Mr. Sterling's company had been hemorrhaging money for months. A $3 million, $3,000 debt, labor lawsuits, and breached contracts. When my legal team presented me with the opportunity to buy it, I saw more than red numbers on a balance sheet. I saw decades of honest work, loyal employees who didn't deserve to lose their jobs because of the mismanagement of a man who, though well-intentioned, had made disastrous decisions. I paid $45 million, not for the company, but for the lives I could save, for the families who depended on those jobs. "Mr. Sterling, you're scaring me," Jasmine insisted, but the arrogant certainty in her voice was gone. "What does my mother have to do with your company?" Devin, her new husband, approached, nervously adjusting his tie. He was a handsome young man, 32 years old, accustomed to comfort, but without his wife's malice. He had inherited his father's kindness, but not his experience in reading between the lines. Mr. Sterling looked directly into my eyes, and in that moment, I saw respect where there had been scorn moments before. "Ms. Beaumont," he said, using my corporate name with a reverence that caused nearby guests to turn their heads. "I want to personally thank you for saving my family's company. Without you, hundreds of employees would have lost their jobs this week." The silence that followed was so dense it could have been cut with scissors. Jasmine stood paralyzed, her mouth slightly open as she processed her father-in-law's words. "Ms. Beaumont," she repeated slowly. "My mother is Baines." Her voice rose an octave, drawing the attention of more guests who began to gather, forming an unintentional circle around us. I still didn't speak. For years, I had perfected the art of silence, of being invisible, of letting others fill the empty spaces with their own conclusions. But now, every second of silence was like a drop of acid falling onto the perfect facade Jasmine had built for her wedding. I could see her mind working frantically, remembering all the times she had mocked my poverty, all the times she had lied to her friends about my job, all the times she had pretended I didn't exist. "Mom," she finally whispered, and the words sounded strange coming from her lips after the public humiliation just minutes ago. "Is what Mr. Sterling is saying true?" Her eyes were shining with a mixture of confusion, hope, and something more dangerous. Greed. I could see the gears turning in her head, calculating possibilities, imagining what this might mean for her financial future. The guests murmured among themselves, creating a background hum like restless bees. I heard fragments of conversations. "She's a millionaire, Jasmine's mother. How is that possible? She always looked so poor." The irony was delicious and bitter at the same time. The same people who had laughed at me 20 minutes ago now looked at me with a mix of curiosity and forced respect. Mr. Sterling extended his hand to me, a gesture that contrasted dramatically with the humiliation he had witnessed moments earlier. "Allow me to introduce you correctly to my family," he said solemnly. This is Eleanor Baines, the businesswoman who just saved my company and the jobs of 600 people. It was my moment. After decades of hiding behind corporate names and legal representatives, after years of being treated as less than nothing by my own daughter, I finally had the chance to speak. But when I opened my mouth, the words that came out were not the ones Jasmine expected to hear. "Mr. Sterling," I said in a soft but clear voice, "I appreciate your words, but I believe there's a misunderstanding." The hope in Jasmine's eyes turned to relief, thinking I was about to deny everything. "I didn't buy your company to be recognized or thanked. I did it because it was the right thing to do." I paused, looking directly at my daughter. It's something I learned observing so much unnecessary suffering in this world. Jasmine blinked, confused. I hadn't confirmed or denied being the buyer, but I had planted a seed of doubt that was going to torment her. I could see her mind struggling between relief and suspicion, between the shame of having humiliated me and the tempting possibility that everything was true. And I, Ellie the Invisible, smiled for the first time all night, knowing the game had just begun. The seed of doubt grew like fire in Jasmine's eyes. For the next few days after the wedding, she didn't stop calling me. First, there were sweet messages feigning maternal concern. "Mommy, are you okay? You looked very nervous at my wedding." Then came the direct questions. "Did you know Mr. Sterling before?" And finally, the desperation. "I need you to tell me the truth about what Mr. Sterling said." I maintained my routine, as if nothing had happened. Every morning at 5, I got up in my small, working-class 2-bedroom apartment. I ate black coffee and toast for breakfast. I put on my cleaning uniform and took the 3 buses that led me to the buildings where I worked. But what Jasmine didn't know was that during those rides, on my corporate phone, I was directing a $200 million, $200,000 operation distributed across investments throughout the continent. On Tuesday night, Jasmine showed up at my apartment unannounced. I heard her fumbling with the old lock on the main building door, cursing under her breath. When she finally arrived at my door, she was wearing an ivory cashmere coat that cost more than my 6 months' rent. Her Italian shoes looked out of place in the worn linoleum hallway and walls that desperately needed paint. "Mom, we have to talk," she announced, sitting on my thrift store sofa and looking around with that familiar look of disgust. "I can't stop thinking about what happened at my wedding. Mr. Sterling seemed different with you, like he respected you in some strange way." I poured myself a cup of tea and sat across from her in my favorite chair, the one I had rescued from the street 15 years ago and had reupholstered myself with cheap fabric. "Your wedding was beautiful, Jasmine. Devin seems like a good man." My voice was calm, but inside I felt a hurricane of emotions. This was the first time in years my daughter had come to my house voluntarily, and it was only because she suspected I might have money. "Don't change the subject," she burst out, jumping off the sofa like a spring. "Mr. Sterling said you are Beaumont. He said you bought his company for millions of dollars. Is it true or not?" Her voice cracked on the last word, revealing the desperation she had been carrying for days. I took a sip of my tea, feeling the warmth slide down my throat. "Jasmine, look at me," I said softly. "Do you really believe that I, who cleans toilets for a living, who wears clothes from discount stores, who lives in this tiny apartment, could be a millionaire?" I stood up and held out my hands to her, showing my rough palms and short, clean nails. "These hands have scrubbed thousands of floors. Do they look like the hands of a CEO?" But I saw something dangerous flicker in her eyes, a spark of suspicion that wouldn't be easily put out. "Then explain why Mr. Sterling called you Ms. Beaumont. Explain why he looked at you as if you were important." It was time to give Jasmine exactly what she needed to torture herself. "Perhaps," I said slowly, "Mr. Sterling confused me with someone else. Or maybe—" I paused dramatically. I had something on my face that reminded him of someone from his business past. Men his age sometimes see ghosts where there are none. "It wasn't a lie. But it wasn't the whole truth either. And Jasmine, with her paranoid mind and heart full of greed, filled the empty spaces with her worst fears and best hopes. I watched her calculate, speculate, and imagine. "But what if he wasn't confused?" she murmured, more to herself than to me. "What if you really have money hidden somewhere?" Over the next few days, Jasmine became an amateur detective. She started showing up unannounced at strange hours, furtively scanning my apartment when she thought I wasn't looking. One afternoon, I found her snooping at my desk while I prepared dinner. "I was just looking for a pen," she lied, but I knew she had been reviewing my papers. What she didn't know was that all my important documents were in a safety deposit box at the city's most exclusive bank. My apartment contained exactly what it appeared to contain: utility bills, grocery receipts, old magazines, and library books. But I had deliberately left some false clues: a bank deposit receipt for $300 that looked like it had been altered, a scribbled phone number that belonged to a pizza place but could look corporate if you didn't call to verify. On Friday, Jasmine arrived with Devin. It was the first time my son-in-law had set foot in my apartment, and I could see the discomfort on his face as he tried to find a place to sit without seeming rude. He was a genuinely kind young man, raised in abundance, but without his wife's cruelty. "Ms. Baines," Devin said, with the formal courtesy he had been taught since childhood, "Jasmine has told me about the confusion at our wedding. My father has been very nervous ever since. He keeps insisting that you look familiar to him in some professional way." Jasmine sat on the edge of my sofa, her eyes constantly moving around the room as if searching for hidden evidence. "Devin thinks we should clear up this misunderstanding," she said, but her tone suggested she didn't want to clear up anything. She wanted to confirm her suspicions. "What kind of clarification?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. But inside, I felt like I was playing chess against a master, every move calculated to take the game where I wanted it to go. Devin cleared his throat. "Well, my father mentioned that the company was bought by a woman named E.J. Beaumont. We thought maybe you know this person, or maybe—" He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation's direction. "Maybe there's some family connection we weren't aware of." Jasmine leaned forward, her eyes bright with anticipation. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the question she had been formulating for days. But my answer left her more confused than ever. "Baines is a very common name," I said simply. "But if Mr. Sterling really wants to meet the person who bought his company, I'm sure he can contact his lawyers to arrange a meeting." I smiled slightly. "Though I don't understand why he would want to personally thank someone for a business transaction." Jasmine practically leaped off the sofa. "Because she saved hundreds of jobs. Because she paid more than the company was worth. Because it was an act of generosity, not just business." Her words revealed that she had been investigating on her own, likely pressuring Devin for financial details about his family. And there was the confession that she already knew much more than she had admitted. Jasmine had been assembling the puzzle piece by piece. Now all she needed was my confirmation to complete the picture, but I had no intention of giving it to her so easily. Instead, I sat in my old chair, sipping my cheap tea, looking at my daughter with the serene expression of a woman who had nothing to hide. And for the first time since the wedding, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Fear of being wrong, but also fear of being right. The fear in Jasmine's eyes transformed into pure obsession. Over the next few weeks, her visits became more frequent and more invasive. She arrived at all hours, sometimes with Devin, sometimes alone, always with new questions that she made sound casual, but which I knew she had carefully rehearsed. "Mom, have you ever thought about moving to a better place? Wouldn't you like to have a car instead of taking the buses?" Her eyes scanned my apartment like radar, searching for anything that didn't fit the image of poverty she had known all her life. One Wednesday afternoon, as I was returning from work, I found her sitting on the building's steps. She had been waiting for me for 3 hours in the cold rain, her designer coat soaked and her makeup streaked. "I need the truth," she said, her voice breaking when I approached. "Devin is starting to think I'm crazy. His family looks at me strangely, but I know something doesn't add up, Mom. I feel it in my bones. I brought her up to my apartment and made her hot tea while she trembled on my sofa. For the first time in years, I saw genuine vulnerability in Jasmine, not the calculated manipulation she usually employed. "Tell me what you've been thinking," I said, sitting across from her, as I had done so many times when she was a little girl and had nightmares. "I've been investigating," she confessed, looking at her trembling hands wrapped around the cup. "I hired a private investigator to find out about E.J. Beaumont." My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my expression neutral. "And what did he find?" I asked, with genuine curiosity. I had spent millions of dollars over the years to keep my corporate identity completely separate from my personal life. "Nothing," Jasmine whispered, the frustration in her voice palpable. "It's like Beaumont is a ghost. She has companies registered in 12 different countries, but she never appears in public photos, never gives interviews, never attends social events. Her lawyers handle everything through representatives. The detective said in 30 years of his career he'd never seen anyone so careful about their privacy." I leaned forward, feigning interest. "And that makes you suspicious of me?" Jasmine looked up, her eyes red from crying. "Mom, you cleaned those corporate offices at night. You were there when the executives worked late, when they made their important calls, when they left documents on their desks. Did you never learn anything you could have used?" It was a shrewd question, closer to the truth than she imagined. "Jasmine," I said softly, "if I had learned corporate secrets cleaning offices, don't you think I would have improved my life a long time ago? Don't you think we would have lived better when you were a child?" But she shook her head violently. "Maybe you didn't want anyone to suspect. Maybe it was safer to live poor while you secretly accumulated money." Her voice rose, filled with a desperation that broke my heart. "Mr. Sterling keeps asking about you. He keeps saying your face is familiar from important video calls. Devin is starting to ask strange questions about our family." I got up and went to the kitchen, needing a moment to process. Jasmine had hired a professional detective and still couldn't connect me to E.J. Beaumont. That meant my precautions had worked, but it also meant she wouldn't give up easily. When I returned with more tea, I found her looking through the books on my shelf, those used finance books I had been collecting for decades. "Why do you have all these books about investments?" she asked, holding up a market analysis manual I had bought for $1 at a garage sale. "Since when are you interested in finance?" Her tone was accusatory, as if she had found evidence of a crime. "I buy them because they are cheap, and I like to read," I lied partially. Besides, after years of hearing business conversations while cleaning, I developed curiosity about how companies actually work. It wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth. Jasmine put the book down and turned to me with desperate eyes. "Mom, if you have money, if you have even some money saved up, I need you to tell me. Devin and I are having financial problems." This was the first time she had mentioned economic difficulties, and I saw the perfect opportunity to get information. "What kind of problems?" I asked, with genuine maternal concern. Jasmine collapsed onto the sofa, finally revealing the truth she had been hiding behind her perfect facade. "Mr. Sterling's company was worse off than they told us before the wedding. Even after the sale, there are huge personal debts. The house we live in is mortgaged to the hilt. The cars, the jewelry, everything was bought on credit, thinking the company would keep generating income." There was the confession I had been waiting for. "How much do you owe?" I asked gently. Jasmine covered her face with her hands. $200,000, $200,000 on credit cards, $300,000, $300,000 on the house mortgage, $100,000, $100,000 in personal loans. And that's not counting the wedding expenses, which we put entirely on credit because we thought we could pay it off later. $600,000. $600,000 in debt, an amount that was insignificant to me, but which represented total ruin for them. "And what are you planning to do?" I asked, though I already knew where this conversation was headed. "Mr. Sterling is trying to get another job, but at his age it's difficult. Devin is looking too, but his experience is all tied to the family business. And She hesitated, biting her lower lip as she did when she was a child and had done something wrong. I thought maybe if you really have money hidden, you could help us. Not as a gift, but as a loan. We would pay you back with interest. It was the moment I had been waiting for weeks. Jasmine had finally revealed her cards. She was in financial crisis and saw me as her only possible way out. But instead of confirming or denying her suspicion about my fortune, I decided to give her something even more dangerous: hope mixed with uncertainty. Jasmine, I said slowly, if I had that kind of money, do you really think you would be here begging me after calling me a fat sow in front of 200 people? My voice was soft, but it carried the weight of decades of humiliation. Do you really think someone with money would have silently accepted all the years of scorn you've given me? I watched my words hit her like slaps. Jasmine began to cry in earnest, tears of guilt mixed with financial panic. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry I treated you that way. But right now, you are the only person in the world I can trust. If you have anything you can lend us, I swear we will pay you back every dime. I sat beside her and took her hands, feeling them tremble in mine. Let me ask you something, Jasmine. If I really were a millionaire, if I really were Beaumont, what would you do? How would that change your life? Her eyes lit up with a dangerous mixture of relief and greed. It would mean we can save our house, our marriage, our future. It would mean I don't have to live in fear of losing everything. She paused, looking directly at me. But it would also mean I've been the worst daughter in the world, despising the only person who truly loves me. It was a good answer, but I knew Jasmine was an expert at saying what people wanted to hear. The real question was, what would she do when she knew the truth? Would she love me for my money, or forgive me despite it? Jasmine's tears quickly dried as she saw that I didn't immediately respond to her question about what she would do if I were a millionaire. I watched her wipe her eyes with the back of her hand, rearranging her expression of vulnerability into something more calculated. Mom, she said in a firmer voice, I need you to answer something directly. Are you E.J. Beaumont or not? I got up from the sofa and walked to the window that overlooked the street, filled with potholes and broken streetlights. Jasmine, imagine for a moment that the answer was yes. Imagine that all these years, while you were ashamed of me, I was building a multi-million-dollar empire. I turned to look at her. What do you think that would mean about you as a person? Her face paled. It would mean I'm a monster, she whispered. It would mean I despise the only person who sacrificed everything for me. But then, as if a switch had been flipped in her brain, her eyes hardened. But it would also mean you lied to me for decades, that you let me live feeling superior when in reality I was the one who had nothing. There was the Jasmine I knew. Instead of taking responsibility for her cruelty, she was already looking for ways to become the victim. So, I said calmly, you'd prefer that I was truly poor? Would you feel better knowing that your insults and humiliations really hurt someone who had no power to defend themselves? Jasmine fell silent for a long moment, processing the logical trap I had set for her. Finally, she spoke in a small voice. I just want to understand why Mr. Sterling recognized you. I just want to know if there is any possibility that we can get out of this financial crisis. It was time to take the game to the next level. I went to my room and returned with an old shoebox. I placed it on the coffee table between us. There's something I've never shown you, I said, opening the box slowly. Inside were old documents, photos, and some papers I had prepared specifically for this moment. I pulled out a 15-year-old photo of me leaving an elegant corporate building. I was dressed in humble clothes, but the luxury building behind me was clearly visible. A coworker took this photo, I lied. That day, I was cleaning the offices of Beaumont International Corporation. I watched Jasmine's eyes fix on the building's name visible in the photo. Beaumont, she murmured, taking the photo with trembling hands. You worked for a Beaumont company." Her mind was working furiously, connecting points I had carefully planted. I pulled out another document, a 12-year-old pay stub for cleaning services, where I had digitally altered the employer's name to read Beaumont Enterprise. "I worked for them for years," I said, until— I paused dramatically. "Until I had to quit for personal reasons." Jasmine studied the receipt as if it were a treasure map. "Personal reasons." Her voice was barely a whisper. "What kind of personal reasons would make you quit a stable job?" This was the most delicate part of my plan. I needed to plant the seed of a truth that was credible enough to explain everything, but vague enough to maintain the mystery. There were irregularities in the company, things I saw cleaning offices at night, conversations I overheard. I sat down heavily, as if the memory was painful. One day, the CEO asked me to stay after hours for a private meeting. Jasmine's eyes widened. "He asked you to be a witness to something?" Her imagination was filling in the blanks exactly as I had planned. "I can't talk about it," I said, feigning nervousness. "I signed a non-disclosure agreement, but let's just say there are reasons why someone might want to keep my identity a secret." I put the documents back into the box, noticing how Jasmine followed every move with hungry eyes. "Mom," she said urgently, "are you telling me that you know a secret about E.J. Beaumont? That maybe you worked directly for this person?" She leaned forward. "Is that why Mr. Sterling recognized you? Because you were in important meetings?" I didn't answer directly, but my silence was more eloquent than any words. I watched Jasmine construct her own theory, that I had witnessed something important, that E.J. Beaumont had compensated me somehow, that maybe there was even some sort of blackmail involved. It was a completely incorrect theory, but it was credible enough to explain everything that was inexplicable. "Do you have money from that time?" she asked directly. "Did they give you some kind of compensation for your silence?" Her eyes shone with a mix of hope and something darker, the possibility that her mother was a successful extortionist. "Jasmine," I said firmly, "what happened during that time of my life is complicated. There are powerful people involved, legal agreements I can't break, and consequences that could affect more people than just us." I stood up and began to put the box away. "But if you are truly in a financial crisis, maybe there's something I can do." Jasmine jumped off the sofa as if she had received an electric shock. "What kind of something?" Her voice was high-pitched, desperate. "Do you have access to money? Can you get a loan? Do you know someone who can help us?" I looked her directly in the eyes. "I can make some calls. There are people who owe me favors from that time, but I would need to know exactly how much you need and what for." It was a vague promise, but full of possibilities, designed to keep Jasmine on the hook while I decided my next move. $600,000, $600,000, she said immediately. "We need $600,000 to pay off all the debts and start over." Her hands trembled as she spoke. "We could pay interest, give collateral, whatever is necessary." "That is a considerable amount," I said thoughtfully. "I would have to make very important calls, contact people who prefer to remain private." I paused. "And I would have to be sure that you understand the seriousness of what I'm willing to do." Jasmine nodded violently. "We understand. We are serious. This is not a whim, Mom. It's our life." But then, as if a new idea had crossed her mind, she looked at me with suspicion. "But what would you have to do in return? What kind of favors would you have to ask?" It was a smart question, and I saw that Jasmine was beginning to understand that any solution to her financial crisis might come with a price she hadn't considered. "That," I said mysteriously, "depends on how much you are willing to risk to save your future." And with those words, I left my daughter in a state of agonizing anticipation, knowing she would spend the next few days imagining all the possibilities, both wonderful and terrible, of what I might be willing to do for her. For the next 3 days, Jasmine called me every 2 hours. Her messages went from desperate gratitude to pure anxiety, and then to something bordering on obsession. Did you make the calls, Mom? When will we know something? Do you need Devin and me to be present for a meeting? Her voice became sharper with each call, and I could hear how the tension was affecting her marriage, with Devin constantly asking her what was going on. On Friday night, I decided it was time for the next phase of my plan. I called Jasmine and told her I had news. I need you and Devin to come to my apartment tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. And Jasmine, I paused dramatically, make sure no one else knows about this meeting, especially Devin's family. When they arrived on Saturday, Jasmine was wearing an elegant black dress, as if she had dressed up for an important occasion. Devin seemed nervous, adjusting his tie repeatedly and looking around my modest apartment with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. It was clear Jasmine had told him something, but not everything. Before we start, I said, serving them in my chipped mugs, I need you to understand something very important. The conversation we are going to have tonight cannot leave these four walls. There are powerful people involved, and your financial future depends on your ability to keep secrets. Devin cleared his throat. Ms. Baines, Jasmine told me you know people who could help us with our financial situation. We deeply appreciate any help you can give, but we don't want to get you into trouble for us. What a sweet, honest young man. His genuine concern for my well-being contrasted dramatically with the poorly concealed greed I saw in Jasmine's eyes. Devin, I said softly, how much has Jasmine told you about my work past? He looked nervously at his wife. She said you worked for an important company years ago and that maybe you know influential people who could help us get a loan. It was a heavily edited version of the truth, and I could see that Jasmine had been careful not to reveal her wilder suspicions about my identity. It's more complicated than that, I said, standing up to close my apartment curtains. The gesture was purely theatrical, but I saw how both of them tensed up. For years, I worked cleaning the offices of one of the most powerful companies in the country. But my job wasn't just cleaning, it was observing, listening, reporting. Jasmine leaned forward, her eyes shining. Reporting what? To whom? Her voice was barely a whisper, as if we were finally getting to the heart of the mystery that had been torturing her for weeks. Financial irregularities, private conversations, meetings that officially never happened. I paused, letting the tension build. My direct boss was not the cleaning supervisor, it was Beaumont herself. The silence that followed was so thick it could be cut with a knife. Devin blinked, confused, clearly not understanding the implications, but Jasmine turned white as a ghost. Are you saying you worked directly for E.J. Beaumont? Her voice broke on the last word. For more than 15 years, I confirmed, watching her hands begin to tremble. My official job was night cleaning. My real job was to be her eyes and ears in an industry full of corruption and fraud. It was a carefully constructed lie, but with enough elements of truth to be credible. Devin still didn't fully grasp it. Ms. Baines, are you saying you were like a private investigator? His innocence was refreshing, contrasting with the way Jasmine was frantically calculating the implications of what she had just heard. It was more than that, I said, deciding to give Jasmine exactly what she had been waiting to hear. During all those years, E.J. Beaumont compensated me very generously for my discretion. And when I retired from that job, I made sure I had enough resources to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Jasmine practically leaped out of her seat. How much? She asked bluntly. How much money do you have? Her mask of filial concern had completely disappeared, replaced by a pure avarice that hurt me to see, even though I had expected it. Enough, I replied calmly, to resolve your financial crisis several times over. But the question is not how much I have. The question is what you are willing to do to earn it. Devin looked increasingly uncomfortable. Ms. Baines, we don't want your money as a gift. We are willing to work, to pay interest, to give collateral. We just need help getting through this tough time. But Jasmine was already beyond courtesy and good manners. What kind of things would we have to do? She asked directly. What do you want in exchange for the money? Her eyes shone with a mixture of desperate hope and something darker, the willingness to do almost anything to get out of her crisis. It was the perfect moment for the final test. For weeks, I had been sowing doubt and suspicion, building a narrative that explained all the inexplicable things about my life. Now it was time to see what kind of person my daughter truly was when faced with the possibility of financial salvation. "Jasmine," I said slowly, "for years, you have treated me as if I were invisible. You have insulted me, humiliated me, and publicly scorned me. Last week, you called me a fat sow in front of 200 people. I watched her flinch at my words. But now that you suspect I have money, suddenly I am the most important mother in the world." Her cheeks flushed. "Mom, I am so sorry for how I've treated you. If I could go back in time and change my behavior, I would. Please don't let my past mistakes affect our future." "Our future," I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Or your financial future." The distinction was important, and I wanted both of them to understand exactly what was at stake here. Devin intervened, clearly sensing the tension between Jasmine and me. "Ms. Baines, I understand Jasmine hasn't always been the most attentive daughter, but she has really been struggling with a lot of stress lately. Our financial problems have been overwhelming, and perhaps that has affected her behavior." It was a sweet but naive defense. Devin still didn't understand that Jasmine's cruel behavior toward me had begun decades before they had money problems. "Devin," I said gently, "I appreciate you defending your wife, but I need you to understand something. If I am going to help you financially, I need guarantees that my generosity won't be misinterpreted or misused." Jasmine leaned forward, her eyes shining with anticipation. "What kind of guarantees? We'll do whatever it takes. We'll sign any document. We'll accept any condition." Her willingness to accept unknown terms without even asking for the details told me everything I needed to know about her state of mind. "Very well," I said, getting up to go to the desk where I had prepared some documents specifically for this moment. "I've been preparing a proposal that could solve all your financial problems, but before I show it to you, I need to know, are you prepared for permanent changes in your relationship with me?" "What kind of changes?" Devin asked cautiously, but Jasmine was already nodding before hearing the answer. "The kind of changes," I said, returning with a folder in my hands, "that will determine whether you truly value family over money, or if money is the only thing that makes you value family." And with those words, I placed the folder on the table, knowing that what it contained would change everything between us forever, one way or another. I opened the folder slowly, revealing documents I had meticulously prepared over the past few weeks. On the first page was a contract that looked completely official, with legal stamps and signatures I had carefully forged. The heading read, "Conditional Financial Transfer Agreement," and it was dated just 3 days prior. "This," I said, placing the document in front of them, "is a proposal I have been negotiating with my contacts since our last conversation." Jasmine pounced on the paper like a hawk on its prey, her eyes quickly scanning the lines, while Devin read over her shoulder with an increasingly worried expression. The document they were studying contained specific terms: a transfer of $800,000 to cover all their debts, plus $200,000 for relocation expenses, in exchange for conditions I had designed to test exactly what kind of people they truly were. "First condition," Jasmine read aloud, her voice trembling slightly, "complete transfer of all current personal assets as collateral guarantee." She looked up at me. "This means we would have to transfer the house, the cars, everything into your name?" "Temporarily," I said, watching their reactions carefully. "Just until you demonstrate you can responsibly manage such a large amount of money. It's a standard protection in these types of transactions." Devin frowned. "Ms. Baines, that would leave us completely dependent on your goodwill. What happens if something happens to you? What guarantees do we have?" It was a smart question that showed Devin, unlike Jasmine, was thinking beyond the immediate solution. "Second condition," Jasmine continued, ignoring her husband's concern. "Immediate relocation to a city of my choice, with limited family contact during a 5-year probation period. The silence that followed was deafening. Devin paled visibly. Limited family contact? What exactly does that mean? His voice had lost all its usual courtesy and now sounded genuinely alarmed. It means, I said calmly, that for 5 years you would live in a city I would choose, in a house I would provide, with a monthly stipend that I would determine. Family visits would be restricted to pre-approved occasions, and all communication with me would go through intermediaries. Jasmine was frantically reading the rest of the document. Third condition, voluntary renunciation of all future inheritance rights. Her voice cracked slightly as she read that line. You're saying that if we accept this money, we give up any inheritance you might leave us? Exactly, I confirmed. This would be your one and only financial benefit from our family relationship. After this, you would be financially independent, and I would be free of any future obligation to you. Devin abruptly stood up from the sofa, his face flushed with indignation. Ms. Baines, with all due respect, this is not a loan or family help. This is like buying our freedom. His voice trembled with emotion. You are offering us money in exchange for essentially cutting off all family ties. But Jasmine continued to study the document with hungry eyes. How much would the monthly stipend be, she asked, completely ignoring her husband's protest. And what kind of house would you provide? The difference in their reactions was exactly what I had expected and feared. Devin saw the proposal for what it was, a cruel test disguised as generosity. Jasmine saw only the numbers and the financial possibilities. The stipend would be $4,000 a month, I replied, watching Jasmine's eyes light up with greed. The house would be modest but comfortable. In a small city where the cost of living is low, you could live comfortably but not extravagantly. Jasmine, Devin turned to his wife, his voice full of disbelief. Are you really considering this? Talking about accepting money in exchange for cutting ties with your own mother? He ran his hands through his hair, clearly struggling to maintain his composure. This is not right. Something about this whole situation is wrong. Jasmine finally looked up from the document. Devin, listen to me. We are about to lose everything. The house, the cars, our reputation, our future. My mother is offering us a way out. Her eyes shone with a desperation that broke my heart. 5 years is not forever. We could take the money, settle in a new city, build a new life. And after 5 years, what? Devin asked, his voice full of pain. We come back as strangers? Your mother becomes someone who used to know you? Our future children grow up without knowing their grandmother? His questions cut the air like blades, exposing exactly what was at stake. I got up and walked toward the window, giving them space to argue, but staying close enough to hear every word. This was the conversation I had been waiting for. The moment when their true values would surface under extreme pressure. Devin, Jasmine said in a softer voice, my relationship with my mother is already broken. A week ago, I called her a fat sow in public. Years before that, I treated her as if she were invisible. Maybe this is what I deserve. Maybe it's time for me to pay for my mistakes. Don't say that, Devin exclaimed. Past mistakes can be repaired. Families can be healed. But what your mother is proposing is not healing. It's amputation. He turned to me. Ms. Baines, I understand that Jasmine has hurt you deeply, but this is not justice. This is vengeance. His words hit me harder than I had expected. Devin had identified exactly what I had been denying myself. That part of my proposal came from a desire for revenge, not love. Devin, I said softly, turning to face them, what do you suggest then? That I give you the money unconditionally? That I allow Jasmine to continue treating me like a human ATM? I suggest, Devin said firmly, that we find a way to heal the relationship between the two of you without involving money. I suggest that Jasmine work to earn your forgiveness through actions, not financial transactions. Jasmine abruptly stood up, the document trembling in her hands. Easy for you to say. You're not the one who's going to lose everything. Her eyes filled with tears of frustration. You don't understand what it's like to live with the shame of having publicly humiliated the only person who truly loves you. Her voice cracked. At least with this agreement, we could start over. We could build something real. Build what? Devin asked desperately. A life based on money stained with the blood of a destroyed family relationship? He turned to me again. Ms. Baines, you have been intelligent and successful all your life. Surely you can see that this won't bring peace to anyone. It was a crucial moment. I could maintain my charade and let them choose, knowing that Jasmine would probably accept the terms and Devin might possibly leave her because of it. Or I could use this moment to reveal the truth about who I really was and why I had orchestrated this whole elaborate test. There is a fourth condition, I said finally, that is not written in the document. Both of them looked at me with tense expectation. Before you sign anything, before you make any decision, I need to tell you the whole truth about who I really am. Jasmine let the document fall onto the table. What truth? There's more? Her voice was barely a whisper, as if she finally realized she had been playing a game whose rules she didn't fully understand. The truth, I said, walking toward my desk to pull out a different folder, is that I don't need special contacts to get that money. The truth is that that document you just read is completely fake. I returned with the real folder, the one that contained the documents that would prove my true identity. And the truth is, yes, Jasmine, I am exactly who Mr. Sterling thought I was at your wedding. The silence that followed was so deep, I could hear the tick-tock of the old clock on the kitchen wall. Jasmine and Devin looked at me as if I had just revealed I was an alien, and in a way, I suppose to them, E.J. Beaumont might as well have been from another planet. For the last 30 years, I continued, opening the real folder, I have built a business empire valued at more than $200 million, $200,000. And all this time, you have been living less than 3 miles from one of the richest women in the country. The folder I opened contained real documents this time, actual bank statements with my real name, corporate ownership certificates, acquisition contracts signed by my own hand, and photographs of corporate meetings where I was clearly identified as E.J. Beaumont. Jasmine picked up the first document with hands that trembled so much she could barely hold it. Checking account. Eleanor Elena Baines Beaumont, she read aloud, her voice barely a whisper. Current balance. The paper slipped from her fingers as if it were on fire. This is real. Devin leaned over to see for himself, his face pale as wax. Ms. Beaumont, he corrected himself, clearly struggling to process the information. You really are... He couldn't finish the question. I am exactly who Mr. Sterling recognized at your wedding, I confirmed, spreading more documents on the table. These are the purchase contracts for his family business. This is my signature. These are the bank transfer receipts for $45 million. Every document I placed down was like a reality bomb exploding in their minds. Jasmine collapsed onto the sofa, her eyes darting between the documents as if she couldn't focus on any of them. But you live in this horrible apartment. You wear thrift store clothes. You take public buses. Her voice cracked. Why? Why live like this if you have all this money? It was the question I had been waiting decades for. Because, I said, sitting across from her, after your father died, I decided I would never be vulnerable again. I decided I would build an empire so solid that no one, not even my own daughter, could hurt me financially. I paused, letting those words sink in. But I also decided I would live simply so I would never lose sight of what truly matters in life. Devin continued to study the documents with an expression of growing astonishment. Ms. Beaumont, these companies, I've heard of these companies. You own the restaurant chain that saved my cousin from bankruptcy. You're the one who bought the textile factory where my aunt works." His voice filled with a new reverence. "You've been saving jobs all over the city for years." "Not just in this city," I said softly. "In 12 different countries. I have acquired companies in crisis, restructured them, and turned them into successful operations that employ more than 50,000 people." It was the first time I had talked about my real work with anyone in my family, and it felt strangely liberating. Jasmine finally looked up from the documents, tears streaming down her cheeks. 30 years, she murmured. "For 30 years, you've been watching me despise you, insult you, treat you like you were invisible. And all this time," her voice broke completely, "all this time, you were more successful than anyone I have ever known." "More successful," I corrected gently, "but apparently not very successful as a mother." The words hurt to say, but they needed to be spoken. Devon sat down heavily, covering his face with his hands. "Oh God, Ms. Beaumont, when I think of the things Jasmine has said about you to my family, the excuses she invented to explain why we never included you in social events." He removed his hands from his face, looking at me with eyes full of guilt. "We judged you so harshly. We thought you were a burden to Jasmine." "You didn't judge me," I said firmly. "I chose this image. I decided to keep my true identity a secret. What you saw is exactly what I wanted you to see." I took another document from the folder. "But it also means that every humiliation, every insult, every moment I was treated as less than human, was a choice Jasmine made without any external pressure." Jasmine doubled over, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm sorry," she repeated through her tears. "I'm so incredibly sorry. There are no words to describe how awful I feel. There's no way to undo the damage I've caused." "You are right," I said calmly. "There's no way to undo it, but there are ways to move forward." I got up and went to the desk once more, returning with a different document. "This is my real will, Jasmine. Would you like to know what it says?" Her eyes widened in terror. "Mom, no matter what it says, I deserve to be disinherited. I deserve for you to cut me out of your life completely. It says," I continued, ignoring her protests, "that upon my death, 70% of my fortune will go to charitable foundations I've been secretly funding for years. Shelters for abused women, educational programs for children from working families, scholarships for young entrepreneurs." I paused. "The remaining 30% was intended for you and your future children." "Was," Devon noted immediately, recognizing the past tense. "No longer," I said, looking directly at Jasmine. "After the humiliation at your wedding, I drafted a new will. Now, 100% goes to charity." I watched those words hit her like a physical slap. "Because I realized that giving you money after my death would only validate your belief that money is more important than relationships." Jasmine stood up, swaying, her legs barely supporting her. "It's okay," she whispered. "It's completely okay. You have every right to disinherit me. But please," her voice broke, "please don't cut me out of your life while you are alive. I don't care about the money anymore. I just want the chance to be a real daughter to you." "A real daughter," I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Like the real daughter who introduced me as a fat sow 2 weeks ago?" Devon stepped toward Jasmine, putting his arms around her as she cried. "Ms. Beaumont," he said in a firm but respectful voice. "I understand your pain and your anger. Jasmine has been terrible to you, and there are no excuses for her behavior. But she is your daughter, and you are her mother. There has to be some way to heal this relationship." "Is there?" I asked genuinely. "How do you heal a relationship when one person has spent decades demonstrating that conditional love is the only thing they understand?" Jasmine pulled away from Devon and came toward me, falling to her knees in front of my chair. Mom, I understand I have no right to ask you for anything. I understand I've been a monster to you for years. But if you give me a chance, just one chance, I promise I will spend the rest of my life proving to you who I can really be. And what about your financial problems? I asked. Do you still expect me to help you pay off your debts? Devon and Jasmine looked at each other, and I saw a silent communication pass between them. Finally, Devon spoke. Ms. Beaumont, we will solve our financial problems ourselves. We will sell everything we own. We will move to a small apartment. We will work any job we can get. We don't want your money. He's right, said this new Jasmine, the one who had just discovered she had been despising one of the most powerful women in the country. It's not about the money anymore, Mom. It's about whether there's any way you can forgive me. It was the moment I had been waiting for years. But now that it had arrived, I felt less victorious and more exhausted than I had anticipated. Jasmine, I said softly, forgiveness is not something you earn in one conversation. It's something you build through consistent actions over a long time. Then tell me what to do, she pleaded. Tell me how to start. You start, I said, helping her up from the floor, by publicly admitting what you did at your wedding. You start by apologizing to every person who was present when you humiliated me. And you start by treating me with respect, not because you now know I have money, but because I am your mother, and I always deserved respect. Jasmine nodded violently. I will do that. I will do all of that and more. And I said, collecting all the documents and putting them back in the folder. I need time to decide if I truly believe you can change, or if this is just another performance designed to get what you want. The truth was that after decades of hiding behind a false identity, I wasn't sure who I really was anymore. Eleanor, the invisible woman, or Beaumont, the ruthless businesswoman. And until I knew, I couldn't make any decisions about the future of my relationship with Jasmine. 6 months after that night, that changed everything. I found myself standing in front of the mirror in my new apartment, an elegant penthouse downtown that finally reflected my true financial position. I no longer wore thrift store dresses or took 3 buses to get to work. My hair was professionally cut, I wore discreet but elegant jewelry, and my clothes were designer. For the first time in 30 years, Eleanor Baines and E.J. Beaumont were the same person. The change had been harder than I expected. For decades, fake poverty had been my armor, my way of keeping money-hungry people away from my real life. Now, living openly as the successful woman I was, I had to navigate a completely different world of social relationships and family expectations. Jasmine had kept her word in ways I never would have imagined. 1 week after our revelation, she organized a dinner for Devon's entire family, including Mr. Sterling and the 200 closest guests from their wedding. At that dinner, in front of everyone who had witnessed my humiliation, Jasmine stood up and read an apology she had written by hand. 6 months ago, she had said, her voice trembling but clear, I publicly humiliated the most important woman in my life. I called my mother a fat sow in front of all of you, laughing as if her pain were entertainment. The words had cut the air of the elegant restaurant like blades. What I didn't know, is that my mother is one of the most successful businesswomen in this country. But that is not what makes my behavior unforgivable. What makes it unforgivable is that she is my mother, and I chose cruelty over love. It had been one of the bravest and most humbling moments I had ever witnessed. Jasmine cried throughout the apology, but she didn't stop until she finished every word she had written. Mr. Sterling had cried too, apologizing for having laughed at me that night. The transformation at the table had been palpable, from cruel amusement to collective shame, but the public apologies were only the beginning. Jasmine and Devon had sold their elegant house, their luxury cars, and all the costly possessions they had accumulated. They moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a working-class neighborhood, and both got modest jobs. Jasmine as a receptionist at a medical clinic, Devin as a junior accountant at a small firm. For the first few months, they rejected every offer of financial help I made. When I offered to pay off their debts, Devin firmly said, "Miss Beaumont, we need to prove to ourselves and to you that we can be responsible without your money." When Jasmine first came to my corporate office, gasping at the 40-story building that was my headquarters, she asked me for only one thing. "Show me how you built all of this. I don't want your money. I want to learn to create my own." And so began the strangest part of this whole story, teaching my 34-year-old daughter how to be a functional adult. During our weekly lunches, which began as tense meetings in neutral coffee shops and gradually moved to more personal restaurants, Jasmine asked me questions that broke my heart. How did you know which stocks to invest in? How did you make business decisions without emotion? How did you maintain discipline for years without seeing immediate results? What impacted me most was the realization that Jasmine had never learned those skills because I had never taught them to her. During her childhood and youth, I had been so busy building my secret empire that I had left her financial and emotional education to chance. In a way, her materialism and cruelty were symptoms of an upbringing where money was mysterious and magical, something that appeared or disappeared without clear explanation. The decisive moment came 4 months after our revelation. Jasmine arrived at our weekly lunch with something I had never seen in her eyes before: genuine pride, not based on material possessions. "Mom," she said, smiling in a way I hadn't seen since she was a little girl. "This month, Devin and I paid all our bills without using credit cards. It's the first time in my adult life that has happened." It was a small achievement by objective standards, but for Jasmine, it represented a fundamental transformation. And she continued, "We have something to tell you." Devin, who now visited me regularly and had developed a genuinely affectionate relationship with me, took her hand. "We're expecting a baby." The news hit me like a lightning bolt. I was going to be a grandmother. After years of resigning myself to a lonely old age, I suddenly had the prospect of a real family. "And what are your plans?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "We want to raise her differently," Jasmine said immediately. "We want her to meet her grandmother from the day she is born. We want her to understand the value of hard work and humility, and we want her to know that family love is unconditional." It was at that moment that I made the decision I had been postponing for months. "There's something I need to tell you," I said, opening my purse to pull out a document I had been carrying with me for weeks. "I've been thinking a lot about the future, about what I want to do with my fortune." Jasmine tensed immediately. "Mom, if this is about inheritance, we already told you we don't want your money." "It's not about inheritance," I said softly. "It's about something more important." I placed the document on the table. It's the charter of the Baines Sterling Family Foundation. I have decided to convert half of my fortune into a charitable foundation that will be run by the next generations of our family. Devin studied the document with careful eyes. "What exactly does that mean?" "It means," I explained, "that when my grandson or granddaughter grows up, she will have the opportunity to learn about financial responsibility by managing resources to help others. It means that Jasmine can develop her own career in philanthropy if she wishes. And it means that none of you will ever be rich by inheritance, but you will always have the opportunity to make a difference in the world." Jasmine began to cry, but this time they were tears of gratitude, not desperation. "It's perfect," she whispered. "It's exactly what our baby needs. Purpose without privilege, opportunity without ease." Over the following months, we worked together, designing the foundation's programs. Jasmine turned out to have a natural talent for identifying community needs and developing practical solutions. Devin contributed financial management skills that perfectly complemented her passion. For the first time in decades, I felt like I had a real family, not perfect, but genuine. The day my granddaughter, Aaliyah Beaumont Sterling, was born, I held that tiny creature in my arms and made a silent promise. She would grow up knowing exactly who her grandmother was, both Eleanor Baines and E.J. Beaumont, from day one. There would be no secrets, no false identities, no shame about success or humility. Now, when I look back at that terrible night at Jasmine's wedding, when she called me a fat sow in front of 200 people, I can see that it was the catalyst we needed for a transformation that never would have been possible without pain. Jasmine had to hit rock bottom to learn to value what truly matters. I had to risk total loss to discover what I was really willing to fight to keep. The question I ask myself now, as I look toward the future with hope I hadn't felt in decades, is this: and you, in your own families, in your own lives, have you had the courage to be completely honest about who you really are? Or are you still hiding parts of yourselves out of fear, protection, or pride? Because the truth I learned, though painful, is that there can be no real love where there are fundamental secrets. And in the end, real love, not money, is the only thing that truly holds us together when everything else falls apart. Did you like my story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.